Okay, so talk on demystifying Perl one-liners. This is usually a 50-minute talk that I don't have 20 minutes for, so I'm going to go a little fast and end up skipping most of the examples I have at the end. So who am I? I have a PhD in computer science. If I want to be super fancy, I can say I'm a cancer researcher at the radiology department in the Columbia University Irving Medical Center. If I don't want to be fancy, I can say what I really do is work with CSV files all day long and write little Perl and Python scripts for them, and write a lot of emails too. Been using Perl since 1996. I've been coming to not as many YAPCs as Abigail, but lots of them, almost all of them. I think I did the first version of this talk in 2007, mainly because I was trying to think of something to say and I saw it to talk about, and I saw it in a list of potential topics. I've used this almost every day since then. It's super, super useful. So what's a one-liner? A one-liner is a complete Perl program written at the command line. And you might think this is just for like gurus and try to write obfuscated Perl. Some of the things I'm going to show you look a little obfuscated, but when we get through these next 20 minutes, you'll understand what's going on. They're super, super useful, but they can be a little intimidating too until you know what's going on. And I'm not going to lie, like Perl has this reputation for producing like unreadable, unmaintainable code. You go to a lot of the other talks here, and people have come up with ways to get around it. But we can still write quick and dirty programs. It might be a little unreadable and unmaintainable, but again, it's just because you need to learn what's going on with this. And nothing's quicker, dirtier than the one-liner. So you can say like, I don't even really like write Perl anymore. A lot of us might be in that position. I had to change the languages up here at the top from the last time I gave it. But even so, text files are everywhere. You know, we're all used to the Unix command line, right? All this other stuff it fits in really well to this ecosystem with all the other tools from the Unix command line, except you can kind of write ad hoc things as you're going along. So you can be like this ninja, kind of going in, doing what you want to do. Just so you can say everything, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, whatever you're doing, if you're other thing, no one's ever going to know that you're writing Perl because you're just doing it at the command line, and that's it. And it's going to free up your time to work on the tools that Jeff just taught us. We'll have more time to do this. That is someone that knew his way around a craps table. He was able to get the odds into his favor. Was he throwing the dice the same way? I forget. I don't know. He crushed them a little bit. Okay, so here is a Perl one-liner. So let's run through it. When you run this from the command line, it's going to say hello world. So let's break it down. The -E means that you're going to enter the program at the command line. Whatever is after the E is going to be a Perl script. It's going to be Perl code. Usually you want to enclose the program in single quotes because you're going to generally have things that have dollar signs in them in there. You don't want the shell to expand them, so you want to put them in single quotes. It doesn't quite work in Windows, but in Windows nowadays you've got the Unix, you've got the little Unix subshell that you can use for it instead. In this case, you don't need a semicolon because that's it's just one line. You don't need it. I'm not going to use script. I'm not going to use warnings. Because not to say script and warnings are great. That's the entire program right there. You can reason about anything that you would try to catch with script and warnings. Generally, you can figure out just because the program's by nature going to be pretty short. And like there's no test, right? Because it's going to do what it's going to do. Okay, so that's all you need to know. Now we're done in like 5 minutes, and now we can go spend the rest of our time getting ice cream or some more popcorn or whatever. Okay, so the whole rest of this is about syntactic sugar to make your one-liners easier to write. And Perl programmers love the syntactic sugar. I need to find these somewhere someday. All right, so let's move on. So the way we do this is lots of other flags. The first one we're going to talk about is the -L flag. That's not a 1, that's a lowercase l. What that does is it automatically adds a new line to whatever you print. So this is what I had before, print hello world, \n for a new line. if you give the -L option, you can leave off the \n, and that'll just says print hello world. And they're going to result in the same thing. It's not a lot of savings on its own, but all these little things can add up. Also importantly, and I'd forgotten about this until I was reviewing to give the talk today, is it also automatically chops the line when used with some of the other options, which we're going to get to in a few slides. And that is pretty useful. Okay, way back in Perl 5.10, they introduced this new built-in function called say that works just like print, except it automatically adds a new line. But it doesn't work with -E. You get this big, ugly message. Why is that happening? That's because in order to break backward compatibility with something that came out 20 years ago, it's turned off by default in 5.10 and later. You can turn it on lots of different ways, but in the command line, from the command line, if you say -E, then it turns on say, and then you can say, if you say Perl -E, say hello world in double quotes. I should have said, because you're putting the code in single quotes, generally, why don't I just pick this up? Because you have the code in single quotes, any other strings are generally going to be in double quotes, and that's the case here. So if you say -E, then you can use say. So what the -E really does is it tells Perl to turn on all of its optional features. I have a list here from 5.26, which might have been around the time I gave the talk here at YAPC the last time. Those things are all great, but probably you're not going to use any of them except for say in a one-liner. And in fact, as of Perl 5.40, there's a much longer list. Just review Perl doc feature, you can see all the things that get turned on. All right, so now we get to the fun stuff though. So suppose, this is just a dumb example. Suppose you want to print out, you have a bunch of Perl modules and you have this new coding standard that lines can't be any longer than 80 characters. So you want to find all the .pl files in your directory that are longer than 80 characters. So we could do this, knowing what we know so far, and that's just an entire one-line program, and it's going to loop over star.pl, and it's going to anything. It's going to print out all the lines that have 80 characters. It's not going to print out the files that have 80 characters, but whatever, right? So anyway, we want to be able to write loops like this, but they get tedious to write this all the time. So Perl has this -N flag that automatically puts a loop around your code. So it's equivalent to doing that. So it's going to put that while less than greater than loop around everything. And all you're writing is the body of the program. So that's what I had before. And this is what I have afterwards. And now, so you see, again, all it's putting is the body of the loop there. And that's what really starts saving you time, because now you don't have to write all the loop. Now it's really easy to loop over all the lines in your program. I'm hearing noise coming from somewhere else right now. Okay, fine. This is where they start getting really powerful, because you can write loops and iterate over all the lines in a file without having to actually write all the boilerplate code to make the loop. So suppose you want to do pre and post processing. So suppose you want to add up all these numbers. So I have this file called nums.txt. It's just first line's 1, and then 2, and then 3.4, and then 4. So what you can do here is you can put pre-processing in a begin block and post-processing in an end block. So that's what I did here. I'm adding up all the numbers in $S, and then at the end, in an end block, I say, when it's all done looping, I say $S, and it prints out 10, because that's what 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is. If we wanted to multiply them together, it's similar, but we have to initialize it to 1. But otherwise, the logic is the same. And still the begin and end things are going to get evaluated separately, and the only part that happens for every line in the loop is the part in the middle. And you can start doing these things. You can have it, put things into hashes and then split out the hashes at the end. You can do all kinds of stuff with that. So another example, suppose we want to take an existing file and we want to just convert it to lowercase. A simple example. Foo, and we want to convert it to lowercase. So knowing what we know so far, we could do this, right? So that's just going to print it out to standard out, but otherwise we see that it's going to do that, right? right? If we want to save it to a different file, then we can redirect the output to foo.out. It's also really common that you maybe want to munge a line and then print things out at the end. So there's another flag that does that, and that's the -p flag, P for print. So that's like -n, except at the end, no matter what you do, it's going to just do print. It's going to print whatever is in $_ Boy, this is going by fast. That's without -p. This is with -p. We could also do this in place with the -i flag. So if we just want to print the standard out, we can do this. We can edit the file, quote unquote, in place by doing p-i, and then it's going to edit it in place. It's not exactly in place because you can end up with a different inode than what you had before, but it's effectively in place. You can do multiple files by just putting a star, by putting stars at the end. All right, so that's dangerous. So Perl also lets you make backup files, so you can say, you can put the original in, like whatever the original file name was, and then put a .back at the end. You can only do that once. The second time if you run it, it's going to overwrite what you had before. So it's not perfect, but it at least gives you one chance to screw up and test. All right, so going quick, there's a way to automatically split each line, like in awk or in cut, the cut command. By default, it splits on spaces, but you can use the -F flag to split on something else. So here's an example of doing that, parsing the output of PS. It puts them into a variable called @F, which is why here I'm looking for the, I guess, the fourth thing, which is $$F3. I don't know, that's what I'm looking for. Anything with parent processes in the fourth column, I'm looking for things that have the fourth column of 1. I know I'm going very fast because I just want to get through these things. Let's skip that. Back in 520, they simplified this even more. If you say -A, if you say -F implies -A implies -N. You can also put a -L at the end, in which case it will chomp the line, including $F sub -1, so you don't have to treat the last one as a special case, because otherwise the last one would have a new line on it, the other ones wouldn't. So keep that in mind. You use modules with -M, like that. As of 5.40, hot off the presses from a few weeks ago, I had to add this bit to the slide. You can put spaces between the M and the name of the module. Which is pretty cool. You can tell where I did the talk originally. What else? Let's skip over this part because I wanted to go input record separators, and we'll just kind of finish up here. Perl is this thing. Normally, Perl, when you read lines, it's going to read lines up to a new line, but you can actually change that, and that variable $/ is the input record separator. You can change that. Normally in Perl, you can change $/ to whatever you want, but you can also do that from the command line with the -0 flag. You can split on carriage returns if you wanted to by doing it that way. You can split on null characters, which is useful if you're using find -print 0. If what you're trying to split on has spaces in it, you have to do this, and then you end up splitting on the null characters. It's a pain in the butt, but you have to do that a lot of times. Paragraph mode means it's going to split on 2 new lines in a row. That's really useful for things like postfix logs is one case. If you have a mail queue, you look at the mail queue, that gives a block of things and a new line, then a blank line, and then other things. Things are separated by blank lines. Really useful to be able to do that. If you say -0777, it will slurp in the entire file. And as of 5.36, another new thing I had to add for this talk, you can say -G for, I think, gobble, and that will also change the new line separator to read in the entire file, which sometimes you want to do. Here's all the things I just went over very fast. And here's some more information. So the 2 big things you want to look for, Perl-H will give you a summary of all the command line options. What you really want to look at is Perl run, and that tells you in great detail what all the things do. About maybe half of them have to do with one-liners, and half of them have to do with other things. Some of these are very old. I'm not sure what the Tom Christensen one-liners were, but that first thing, the Perl one-liners by Pederis Crummus, still seems to be in print. The Perl one-liner on Twitter hasn't been tweeted at in over a decade, but they're all still there, and so you can still look them up. And I think that's probably it, and everything else was like other examples that I don't have time for because I'm out of time now. Do I have time for Q&A? Oh, I have 5 minutes for Q&A. So then you have Q&A. Otherwise, I'll go through some of the examples in the module part that I just ran through. Yes?
A quick question about the dash capital E with the additional extra stuff.
Yes.
If you're working with like emojis, then you want the Unicode string, and so you enable that. Is that right?
That is a good question, and I have never tried it. The question is, if you want to print out things that have Unicode, would you have to turn that on? Maybe. I've never tried it, so I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately. Can you just put Unicode in Perl strings normally? Yes. So maybe you don't need, it depends what you want to do with the emojis, I guess. Let me just back up here, and I wanted to go over some of these examples. Yeah, this is one. This is a trick from like Greb. Someone used to come to these things. So this is like a little utility function. This is this just dumps out whatever is in a hash, really. It's going to loop over all the keys in a hash, sort them by the values, I guess, and then print them out with tabs in between them. So he suggested putting that in a module called y.pm and all these little utility things in y.pm. And that way you could say Perl-my, and you get all these utility functions in there that you could use from the command line. And so you could, what I'm doing here is I want to add up how many times each of those words appear. And so I say Perl-my to read in that function called hv, and then every time I get it, I just add them to a hash called $h, and then I keep a count in $h of how many times each of the words appear, and then that hv thing that it gets loaded in, which was on the slide back here, just dumps them all out. So, I mean, that's kind of like a cute idea. I find in practice, well, first of all, it's a little tricky to type something like this in on the command line, so that's good. But I think in practice also, you might want to have them sorted the other way. You might want to have them be commas instead of tabs. You might want to print the key and then the value. So maybe you have lots of different versions of this, but then you have to remember them all, or otherwise you have to type them in each time, which you can do too, which is what I end up doing. Are there any other examples here? Oh yeah, this is what it ends up printing out, I guess, at the end. Any other questions? I know I kind of flew through this. Yeah?
It's more of a follow-up to the previous question about Unicode emoji, but I believe the -C, if you use that option, you can set standard in and standard out to UTF-8. So if you are taking input or output, you get the right encoding.
I didn't know that. Let's see. Let's just try it. It's going to be too tiny. So I'll try it later on and then see what it does.
-C, and then you can give it follow-up options. So S is standard in, standard out, and standard error. And then there's various.
I think there's also an A also for all.
Yeah, there's A is.
That includes things you open yourself.
Yeah, A is for argv. So yeah, when you put argv in, so yeah, various different ones.
Yeah, I played with that option before. It's good.
Yeah, that's good to know. What did I write? I think I had some example with. I did have an example with. I think this was my example code where I had something like this. When I was working on my dissertation, I had lines like this, but I copied from the internet somewhere. And that looks okay, but it turns out that's a Unicode dash and not a regular dash. And so LaTeX only likes ASCII. So I had to find all those. And they're really hard to find because they like regular dashes. And so I wrote this Perl one-liner that I just wanted to print out any line that had something that wasn't an ASCII character. And so I guess it did print them out, so it was able to print at least that Unicode. That's the only example I had of Unicode, because usually it doesn't come up with in the course of my job. So, and the other point I'll end with is that this is one thing that like Perl is really good at that like other languages that it's kind of supplanted for other things. So you can't write these sorts of things in Python because it just doesn't have all those switches to support it. As it really Go and Rust and other things. I mean, obviously they're compiled languages. Yeah. So these are all good to know. I'm out of time, so thank you very much. I'll try not to